My grandfather vanished the day of his wedding. Years later, my grandmother found him. My grandparents had the classic love story between a soldier and a nurse. They were madly in love and saving up for a big wedding, but after my grandmother got pregnant, they sped up the timeline. They were so excited to have the baby and start their life together. But on the day of the wedding, my grandfather was nowhere to be found. Everyone thought he'd gotten cold feet and left my grandmother. She was devastated but decided to carry on and be a single mother. She had the baby, my mother, and kept working as a nurse. 3 years later, she started a job at a new hospital. She walked into a patient's room and it was my grandfather. She started sobbing and screaming, but he just looked at her like she was crazy. Turns out he'd been in a horrible car accident the night before the wedding and suffered a severe head injury. When the police found him, he had no ID and no memory of who he was. He'd been in the hospital for long-term psychiatric care ever since. He didn't recognize my grandmother, but she said, "I'll make him remember." Every day she read him letters she wrote to him while he was in the service, and sang the song that was supposed to be their first dance. She made him meals from the family recipes he'd always loved. Slowly his memory started to return. But the moment that made everything click was when he met his daughter. He couldn't stop crying and said he knew that she was his. A year later, he was released from the hospital and my grandparents finally got to have their wedding. They're still happily married and so in love. But my grandmother still teases him about his brain every time he forgets where he puts his slippers.